Hi folks, as suggested before the virus hit, I plan to give people the potential of having a little look at some sports psychology to assist in the finer art, I guess, of managing teams. I come out of 27 years secondary school teaching, coaching teenage and some younger teams all the way through that period. I've got a degree in sports psychology. I'm currently a head of main school at Chipping Camden School and lead on behaviour, which has its roots and its basis in the psychology of kids. So I'm going to do a series of hopefully 5-minute podcasts and sort of narrated PowerPoints, and you can dip into them, whichever topics interest you. I'll try and get a few together, or perhaps publish this first one and see if you want any more, and we can look at it. So first of all, we have to take each of our teams as a group of individuals, and all of them are different. And one of the key ways that they're different is in their personalities. Now, there are essentially three main approaches or theories around personality. One is the trait approach, which believes that your personality is determined by inherited or genetically predetermined qualities, i.e. your personality is set from birth or very early childhood, and therefore your behaviours can be predicted across all different sorts of situations. If you're a shy kid, you're likely to be shy in all situations. If you're aggressive, you're likely to be aggressive in most situations, and so on. The second and perhaps opposing approach to personality and psychology is the social learning theory, which believes that all behaviour is about imitating others, usually adults, usually in role model situations, but essentially copying the behaviour of those around us that we look up to, especially if that behaviour is reinforced, i.e. the children see those behaviours being produced by the adult that they trust in and believe supports them. So if you were giving the ref a bit of stick on a Saturday or on a Sunday, and the children in your care are observing that, they're much more likely to give the referee the stick in that same situation later on, and maybe even 10 minutes later on, because they feel that behaviour has been validated. The interactionist theory is essentially a combination of the two, and it looks at a relationship between the role models in social learning theory and the personality traits of the individual, and therefore the behaviour of that individual can change and adapt to different situations. It's essentially a combination of the other two. So let's look at a trait theory. This is Eysenk's personality trait theory. He believed that people were in 4 categories essentially, or could be placed anywhere around this little diagram on the right hand. I'll point out this little diagram on the right hand side. So you could be introverted, you could be extroverted, which is the opposite end of that scale. You could be a stable personality or fairly unstable. And people tend to slot into these quadrants. So you might be an unstable or neurotic extrovert, or you might be a stable extrovert, or you might be a stable introvert, or you might be an unstable introvert. What do each of those terms or phrases mean? Well, an extrovert personality is outgoing. These are the kids that turn up to your training, booting a ball as hard as they can at a goalkeeper. They want everybody to see them or watch them. They're quite happy to be in the limelight. They're really confident around other people, and they have what's known as a reticular activating system, which is low in sensitivity, i.e. that the brain can respond. It needs lots of stimuli to respond to anything, so they need to be super excited, they need to be super pressured in order to feel nervous or anxious. Otherwise they find that social contact for themselves. They run around, they play the tricks, they shout at people, make jokes, always talking when you're talking, and so on. They become psychologically aroused pretty slowly because they're an extrovert personality and need that in order to perform. An introvert personality is the quieter kids in your team who, do exactly as they're told. They always seem like a pleasure to coach. But of course, in more pressing social situations, and especially big games or where there's any judgment, they're much more sensitive and can react far quicker than an extrovert to that pressure, and often that can be negative. But we'll look at that at a later date when we look at the inverted U theory of arousal. Okay, stable personalities. These are pretty predictable people. They seem to do the same thing most of the time and behave in the same way most of the time. They might appear calm and relaxed and generally get along with others because other children in your team know what to expect from them. They tend to keep themselves on a fairly straight line and usually sort of good captain material. And unstable personalities, these are the ones you have to check and watch and see how they come into the changing rooms before the match, and just see if they appear to be focused. They can be up and down a little bit, and not necessarily through any social issues or anything like that at home, but just because their personality is structured in this way, that their temperament is not sometimes ideal for sports participation, but nevertheless they've been part of the squad for a while, and they're just a little bit up and down. They also worry a little bit when the pressure does come on. And if I don't know, let's say you put them on the bench, they can react to that really badly. Whereas the stable personality sort of goes, oh, okay, I'm on the bench, I'll be on in 30 minutes or whatever it might be, and I'll just play my best then. So the key thing with this slide is figuring out and trying to almost plot your players around here. Who's the most quiet? Who's the loudest? Who's the one who you can predict most of the time? Who's a pretty stable extrovert? These players who you might pop here are your captains. Now there are online inventories, it's called the iSenk personality inventory, where you can find this out, but it's not really that necessary. You know the kids, and as they arrive and you watch them and observe their behaviour, you should be able to place them. And depending on where you place them in which category might influence how you respond to them. Who needs that little bit more time? Who needs the arm around the shoulder? Who needs the little bit of a boost and a bit of judgment necessarily to try to spark them into action and for them to be happy when they're playing. Okay, so that's one trait theory. Another trait theory is quite similar. This is by Giordano. It's called the Narrowband Approach, and it's a bit more simple, I guess, to understand. Giordano says there's essentially two types of characteristics, and if you split your team into one of these two bands, it will give you a good start at understanding what makes them tick. The type A tends to become highly aroused, really energetic, really up for the games, flying into tackles, shouting and screaming in the changing rooms at the start of the game, properly focused on what's going on. As a result, they're also prone to becoming quite anxious. So when things aren't going well, they're always on the edge, type A's. And if you think of A as aroused, anxious, aggressive sometimes, they're impatient with themselves and others. They work fast, they're ambitious, they want everything and they want it now. They're sometimes a bit of a pain in the backside because they never stop. They're like, when are we having a game? When are we having a game? All of those type of things you can associate with type A personalities. They have a tendency to be relatively aggressive players who will get stuck in for you, but you also need to control that aggression. They're highly competitive and they constantly want to be, if you hang up a bib in the air and say, right, I need a volunteer, type A's are always the first one to volunteer. A coach with a type A personality might dispute referees' judgment, so try and figure out your own personality style, whether it's this type A, anxious, ambitious, aggressive, impatient individual. If you do find that some of your players are type A, you have to think about how you control and set the protocols for behaviour of that type A. What are the expectations of the coach. You know, where is the line that they cannot cross, and where's the understanding in terms of what that punishment might be, or withdrawal from the situation. Type Bs are completely different. These people are able to control their arousal, and they keep it under wraps. But as a result, they can be a little bit too relaxed sometimes and appear not particularly fussed or bothered, or never seem to be giving you their very, very best, unless it is those big games which tend to rise Type Bs. They're pretty patient with themselves and cool under pressure, so penalty takers are good Type Bs. They're passive, they'll let things wash over them. You know, if they're on the bench, they'll sort of shrug their shoulders and just get on with it. The Type A's on the bench, and they want to find out why. And of course, their parents might be Type A as well. These Type Bs are less competitive than Type A's, and that's essentially it for trait theories of personality. The key issue is that when you've established whether they're Type A and Type B, or on Eysenk's personality matrix, the cross where they're extrovert, introvert, stable or neurotic, when you've tried to figure out where they are, try and figure out what would allow them to produce their best behaviours for you at the right time, and then go backwards to figure out what your behaviours might be in order to maintain a good standard of conduct within the team, a good level of focus, which players you speak to in which ways, which players you might comment on performance around other children, and which ones you wouldn't, because they may become over anxious and worried about their own performance. So plenty of food for thought. It's 3-4 minutes in. That is a basic understanding of personality and how those individual differences might impact upon performance.